Alright guys, so the last video I recorded basically covered Ricardian equivalence, I guess it gets called, comparative advantage and absolute advantage, and kind of why we have trade. And so the point of this video is to cover the effects of trade, and the way that we talk about that is consumer and producer surplus. So consumer surplus is basically saying how much better off are consumers, and producer surplus is saying how much better off are producers. And to really get down into what this is, I just like to go straight to an example and then explain back from there. So I've gone ahead and created just an imaginary market for surfboards. And so I just said that the quantity demanded is 100 minus P, and then the quantity supplied is equal to negative 20 plus 2 times the price. So what this is saying is that if surfboards were free, what this guy right here is saying, is that if surfboards were free, 100 people would want them, and that for every dollar that it goes up, one less person wants them. So if surfboards are $2, only 98 people will buy them. If surfboards are $3, 97 people will buy them. Obviously unrealistic, but the numbers worked out nicely and it was simple to come up with. So we're just going to go ahead and run with it. The same thing for supply. So what it says is that basically the price has to be at least $10 before anyone will produce a surfboard. So because the intercept is negative 20, to get the quantity supplied up to 1, or up to 2, sorry, the price will have to be $11. So at $11, and I'll just go ahead and do a little math so you can see, that will be 11 times 2, which will be 22. So 22 minus 20 is 2. So when P is equal to 11, that means that we have 2 surfboards. And I'm just writing this small because I don't have a bunch of space. So that's just a little bit of explanation of the supply line and the demand line. It should be review, but it's good to kind of go over it before we get down to this stuff. So what I went ahead and did over here and here is that, to save your time, I didn't go through the calculations with you, but I just solved both of these for P. So because we graph P on the y-axis, this is just like putting these two equations up here in y equals form. So I put them in y equals, and then I just grabbed a computer grapher and graphed them right here. And so we have our normal downward sloping demand line and then our normal upward sloping supply line. And these graphs are these two functions right here. So this is the supply line and this is the demand line. So before we go any farther, we're just going to do a basic review of how many surfboards are sold and at what price. And so to find that, we just find out, well, we find where supply intersects demand. So where there is an equivalence between what the price is that will clear the market for surfboards. So what price are an equal number of consumers and producers willing to pay and accept for surfboards. And that, in graphic terms, is just where these intersect. So that's 60 surfboards at a price of $40 a board. At a price of $40 a board. So that should be complete review. And now what we're going to go ahead and talk about is that, so let's just write this first. P is equal to $40 and Q star is equal to 60 boards. Okay, so now what we want to talk about is how much better off are consumers, our surfboard buyers, our surfers, for this market for surfboards existing. And so you remember from you should have had it both in introductory micro and macro, that what this demand line is really saying is that if the price is $99, way up here, there's one kind of diehard surfer that wants to surf super, super badly and will pay $99 for a board. So he would be willing to pay $99, but he buys the board for $40. So he gets, in benefit, in surplus, all of this line right here. And so that line, what we have in red right here, I'll go ahead and write up here, that would be 99 minus 40, because he gets $99 worth of benefit. He would have paid $99. He only has to pay $40, and that's for one person. So we multiply it by 1 to get the area in this rectangle right here. Now there's the next guy would be willing to pay $98. And so he gets this, which would be so then the next guy gets $98 minus $40, and there's one of them also. And so you keep on doing that all the way down, and I'm not going to do it all the way just because you see what's going on. And the surplus that producers get is basically the entire area underneath this curve. We don't go ahead and worry about the difference right here. That's just because we're using discrete variables. You can't have, a half of a person. So we don't worry about those little triangles that are divided out. And we go ahead and say that consumer surplus is the area underneath the demand curve and above the price line. So consumer surplus, I'll just abbreviate it CS, is equal to the triangle above price and below demand. It's the difference between what people are willing to pay and what they actually have to pay. And so now there is an analogous part for producers, and we call that producer surplus. And the exact same idea goes. There's one guy down here, there's two guys down here that could make surfboards that would be willing to make and be willing to sell surfboards for $11. But they get to sell them for $40 because of this market. So they could make them for $11. Think of it as it cost them $11. They get to sell them for $40. And so they make 40 minus 11. And there are two of them. And so then if you go over one, or if you go up another $2, sorry, hold on one second, let me just look at this. So yeah, so the next whole one, and I'm just doing this so that we have whole numbers, would be when the price is equal to, when the quantity is equal to 4. And so the price will now be 12. So there are another two guys out here that would be willing to produce at a price of $12, but they get to sell their boards at $40. So it costs them $12. They get to sell them for $40, and they make all of this in here. And so you keep on going on and out, and then this is really an approximation. The actual answer, because we're dealing with a continuous function, not a discrete function, is that the producer surplus is the area all the way under here. And this simplification that I'm making is a lot like what you do to introduce derivatives in calculus. It's basically the same thing, but I hope that that makes sense, and if it doesn't, let me know. So again, producer surplus is equal to we'll draw a triangle this way this time, just so you remember. It's equal to the triangle that is below price and above supply. And in real terms, that is the difference between what producers would be willing to accept for their goods, the supply line, what they would be willing to accept, and what they actually are given, the price of the market. And so as you can see, consumers and producers are both better off for this market existing. And so the next question is exactly how much better off are they? And it's actually pretty easy to calculate. So the way that you do it with calculus is you take the integral from here to here and subtract this area and do that whole spiel. But since our lines are, or since our demand and supply curves are linear, it's just this triangle. And they'll always be linear in this course, so don't worry about the calculus definition of it at all. So I'm just going to calculate the area of this triangle, which is 1/2 base times height. So 100 minus 40 is 60. So I'll do this here. So that's 60 is the height. The base is the amount of goods that are sold, quantity, which is 60. So that's a 6, not a 60. And then all of that divided by 2. So 60 times 60 is 3,600. Divided by 2 will be 1,800. So consumer surplus is 1,800. And we can measure this in dollars. It's really measured in units of utility, but we also put the units in dollars. And producer surplus is this triangle. So we have 40 minus 10. That's the height right here. So 40 minus 10, which is 30. So we'll do this over here, I guess. So that is 30 times then the width, or the base, will be 60. And then divided by 2. So 30 times 60, 3 times 6 is 18. So that will be 1,800. Divided by 2 will be 900. So producers are $900 better off for this market existing. And that's all that we're going to introduce in this video. The next video, we're going to go ahead and I'll pick up with this exact same picture, but it's just a lot of recording and a lot to view at once. And we'll go talk about what happens as we open up this market to trade. And I'll see you.